People reading your work, for instance, have called you a poet of loneliness, and referred to perhaps a common title for both your novels and your stories is Remembrance of Things Past. But it does seem most of the stories do seem to be very rooted in a very modern reality. You refer to your inspiration as perhaps Hindu, ancestral, in many ways a reaction against a sort of unitary communist view of the world. But the stories that, when one reads them, where one's struck by how modern a writer you are. What do you feel about that?
Well, I think it's natural because I, as an Indian, living in India, live on various planes of reality. And modernism is one. 20th century is one which I cannot deny, even if I believe in the ancient faith of the Hindus. Because if I cling to that faith, I am being very much false to the reality which I am facing and living through every day of my life. So what you call modern is for me an essential configuration of essences of the times which determine to a large extent my psyche, my personality, my entire emotional makeup. And yet, on another plane, I don't think that this entire emotional makeup is the only way by which I can relate to the world as a Westerner, a European, a French or an Englishman can do. That would be a pure imitation on my part of registering a certain response on their pattern, which would be again false to my Indian reality, which has given me a certain different dimension of vision to approach the world, my own self. Giving you one simple example, a Western man is very much obsessed with history, that history is a certain driving force, a blind force of historical events which lead to a certain truth, and that truth somehow is something which cannot be changed or altered. Now, to me as an Indian, this seems to be a very superstitious faith in the forces of history, as ridiculous as perhaps the Westerners feel my faith in the multiplicity of gods, and the mythological which represent various mythological forces. In what way a Westerner superstition in history, a less blind one than an Indian very deep cherished faith in the various gods who represent various powers and who really built up much of what I would say the 2000 years of a whole way of looking the world, coming into contact with the various forces and powers and the fears that haunt him, that obsess him. To me, that seems to be much nearer than an abstract, very, very inhuman force of history which is walking like a spirit, the Hegelian spirit, monolithic spirit over the earth, to which I must surrender my own self. So, as a modern, I live through history. As an Indian, I reject it on various planes.
It seems to me that some of your writing perhaps is a struggle to transcend the history of the times that you live in. Because it seems to me that it deals far more with that than with
I think that
the gods that you talk about.
Perhaps, but I think that a Western writer also does it in his best moments. After all, Thomas Mann, who was very much a German writer, in his best moments transcended this crippling and the constricting shackles of history in Dr. Faustus when he was writing this novel through the Nazi era of barbarism and trying to find out some eternal truth about the German people, not the truth which was being doled out to them by Hitler. I think it happens even in the Western world. When Marquez writes about the entire mythology of Latin America, it is also on another level a deep criticism of the dictatorships, the despotisms, the historical tyrannies which have been imposed upon the Latin American people by history. So a writer, I don't say that it is the privilege of an Indian writer. I do believe that a writer in his most significant moments of creativity transcends the constricting bondage of history and makes an effort to capture certain eternal truths about life.
Can you name stories or novels where you feel you've achieved that or got near to achieving that?
If I had achieved that, I would stop writing. The very fact that I have failed again and again in my stories to achieve that particular point of realization, which gives me, makes me feel that I should write another story, another novel. The day I will achieve it, I will break my pencil and stop writing.
What drives you to write?
Very difficult question. I think I can do nothing better than that. Perhaps that is the most honest answer. That is one thing which I have been trying to do during the last 25 years. And I think for me, committing a certain thought to the paper is itself a first step to overcome the tyranny of the present. You know, when Virginia Woolf in her diary says that the moment you say fish, the moment you say dinner, already you have mastered this immediate worry of preparing the dinner and preparing the fish. The very word that you write on a piece of paper somehow takes away this apprehension, this fear that the reality will overcome you. I think this process of writing is also the process of, in some paradoxical manner, to redeem yourself from the tyranny of time, the tyranny of the present, the tyranny of the immediate horror of life.
Is that why in so many of your stories you go back to a child watcher, a child is either the center of the story or an observer, perhaps an observer who doesn't understand very much of what's happening around him? What were you reaching back? Was it your own childhood?
Yes, I don't agree with you that the child doesn't understand much. Actually, the way he understands things is something very different from an adult understands it. That is why in my stories I am fascinated by this age between 8 and 14, this not actual childhood but this age where the human mind slowly gets formed, this formative year of adolescence. And in one of my novels, the entire action takes place among adults, but it is observed through the eyes of a 10-year-old boy. He's
a shred of happiness. And
also in a shorter novel, yes, precisely that. And not that he's a participant, but I think it is like a screen. It is a pure screen, a curtain on which he's recording the impressions. So he's not conditioned by any of his emotional vested interests like adults. And I think I tried. I don't think I succeeded very much, but my attempt was not to do anything through the actions of the adult. Each thing, each gesture, each emotional drama be recorded through the eyes of this child who is simply an observer, a participant, and yet whose sympathy is, like that of a writer, is justly distributed among various characters. He's not attached to one particular character. He's a witness to the destiny of these 6 individuals who are acting and interacting with one another.
And those individuals are not, in a sort of stereotyped view of Indian fiction, you wouldn't necessarily imagine that you'd find a number of people who perhaps could be called bohemians, artists, actors, living in Delhi, living rather free lives.
Actually,
relationships among each other.
I think you must, every Indian who comes from a more affluent background feels a certain sense of guilt living in an urban atmosphere of a Delhi posh society. So my desire was to, but they were also very much committed to theatre, the one art, I mean, to which they were committed. My problem in that novel was that how this boy is able to witness the various compromises that these people make, the various self-deceptions they indulge in, not intentional but very naive, very innocent. How in the matters of love, even in the matters of their dedication to art, they are able to betray, or they are able to not understand how to really realize the authenticity of their existence while they are surrounded by a sea of suffering around them. And this not to be done through conscious, discursive, rational theorizing, but through the very innocent, unformed ways of observing which this child is able to do from the first page to the last page.
The other